Hello, this is Zahirul Alam. Welcome you on Frankly Speaking. My guest today is Vandana Shah. She is Regional Director, South Asia Programs, representing Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids and Global Health Advocacy Incubator. Vandana is a global policy and advocacy leader with 20 years of experience in both public and non-profit sectors. She leads policy and program development interventions in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and other South Asian countries. She has supported policy campaign and health systems, strengthening programs in tobacco control especially, obesity, cardiovascular health, drowning prevention, and gender issues. Formerly, she was the executive director of North Carolina Health and Wellness Trust Fund, a state foundation, where she was responsible for developing and implementing statewide public health programs. We are welcoming Vandana Shah on Frankly Speaking. Welcome, Vandana.
Thank you so much. It's a real honor and privilege to be on your show and to be back in Bangladesh after 18 months.
Thank you so much for appearing, for joining me on this Frankly Speaking. Especially would be interested to talk about the tobacco control issue in Bangladesh. We know the many organizations, including the government, have been working on tobacco control. There are specific pledges also from the state level, from the government level, to control tobacco use in Bangladesh in many forms. But as an advocate, as a leading tobacco control advocate, how do you see the overall development and overall progress we have made in Bangladesh?
So I think there's been tremendous progress in the last 11 years that I've been working in Bangladesh. I first came to Bangladesh in April of 2010. Okay. And I think things were just beginning in sort of tobacco control. And I think I worked closely with the government in, developing a strong law amendment. Bangladesh was one of the earliest signatories of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, okay, which is the world's, first and only public health treaty. And to implement that, Bangladesh adopted a strong law, which we worked with the government to actually amend in 2013. And following that, there was a vigorous sort of drive for implementation of the law. Mm-hmm. And we actually saw the results when the second global adult tobacco survey was conducted in 2017. Okay. So we actually saw prevalence declines of 19%, which I think surprised all of us advocates and the government. Okay. And we've also seen a focus on sort of building capacity of civil society as well as mass media campaigns. But I think in the last 4 years, there's been a plateauing of progress in terms of policy change. Okay. And this has been a little disappointing because especially in 2016, we actually partnered with the Bangladesh government to organize a South Asian Speakers Summit, at which the chief guest, your Honorable Prime Minister, made a commitment to making Bangladesh tobacco-free by 2040. So I think the last 4 years, policy progress has plateaued, and we want to make sure that the momentum that Bangladesh had continues in order to achieve that big goal.
Well, how we can do so?
So I think there's some clear policy recommendations. Fortunately, in tobacco control, we've got a real clear path, both from the WHO as well as global experience. Okay. So for Bangladesh, we have some clear gaps in the law that need to be addressed immediately. And in fact, Bangladesh, the Ministry of Health is working on a law amendment. So number one, there are gaps in the smoke-free provision. So Bangladesh still allows designated smoking areas in hotels, restaurants, in public transportation, in offices, okay, and government offices. So we actually have very high exposure to second-hand smoke, which obviously leads to a lot of disease. How many countries,
especially in South Asia, could enact totally 100% smoke-free areas?
So we actually have Pakistan and Nepal, which have 100% smoke-free areas. India has just finalized a law amendment, which is on its way to the parliament, which will also make India 100% smoke-free.
Do you see any possibility from Bangladesh that they will change the law?
So absolutely, the draft law amendment that the government is considering, they are reviewing those provisions because that's a very core part of both policy progress but also prevalence declines and health impact. Okay. So, and we have 67 countries around the world which have actually become 100% smoke-free in all public places.
So is this the main priority which you are pointing out, that making a 100% tobacco-free zone, or what are the other priorities?
So there's three other priorities from our perspective which would really sort of continue the momentum to making Bangladesh 100% tobacco free by
Living up to the
2040.
commitment.
Yes, so the second one, which is sort of the key pillar of the tobacco control policies globally, is becoming 100% tobacco advertisement free. So right now in Bangladesh, we are still allowing CSRs or corporate social responsibilities, there's sponsorship, brand stretching, and also point of sale display. So all of these put tobacco right in the face of the most vulnerable population, which is our youth. So this is a real challenge because, you know, what we really want to protect is the future generation from being exposed to tobacco. So we want to make sure that all direct and indirect forms of advertising are actually completely eliminated.
What do you think? How they can project their advertisement despite of having the law? There is a ban or there is certain
so these are still gaps in the law. So the government needs to close these gaps. You know, these are not covered. So, you know, tobacco industry is making full use. They're doing sponsorship. They're having big CSR campaigns and taking public credit. We saw during COVID that there was a lot of, like, you know, demonstrated like support to government with a lot of credit taken and relationship building. We also see that there's a lot of point of sale display of products, and there's a lot of sponsorship still going on in the country.
So, but then you see that there is huge lot of loopholes in the current law, right?
Yes,
which needed to be addressed.
I mean, not huge, but enough that we are concerned about continued progress. I think you made a strong law amendment, but there's some clear gaps. So the third big provision is the fact that we still allow sale of single sticks. This again is a provision that really sort of addresses youth as well as the poor, because youth and the poor do not buy a full pack of cigarettes. They will often buy a single stick because they cannot afford it. So banning single stick sale will also protect the youth.
Is it possible in countries like Bangladesh to banning single stick in?
Yeah, so India has done this. Implementation is a challenge, but at least banning it will send a strong message, and then doing an sort of an outreach campaign to retailers. And the fourth provision is sort of the whole area of new products. So as you've seen in the last 5 years, industry has innovated and come up with a lot of new products. E-cigarettes, you have heated tobacco products, nicotine pouches. So all of these have been like flooding the markets. So these
even in Bangladesh.
Absolutely. So, you know, it's interesting because e-cigarettes started out as a cessation device, which would be a prescription drug for those who are already addicted to tobacco. But we now find that this is being marketed to kids primarily. It's coming in a bubble gum flavor and a mint flavor. So clearly it's not a cessation device. So globally, there was especially like growing concern based on a product called Juul, which saw dramatic growth in youth overnight. You know, we went to 50% plus usage rate amongst middle school students, which is like 12 to 16. Based on this alarming situation, India in 2019 actually completely banned all e-cigarettes, heated tobacco products, and all other new products. It was a comprehensive ban on sale, manufacture, advertising, import. And I think it's very critical that Bangladesh...
What do you sense from the part of Bangladesh, Mari? Why they don't stop, or why they encourages e-cigarette or vaping or heated tobacco?
So I think the government is now getting quite aware of the situation. There's a lot of interest. In fact, when I was here 2 years ago, I'd done a press event with the health secretary, sort of talking about the alarming situation. So I think that's also part of the law amendment to actually enact...
Since then, any progress you observed?
There's a lot of interest, but I think instead of doing a standalone ban like India, they want to include it within the law amendment bill. So I understand that the draft bill will include a provision to ban all new products. And this is critical because Bangladesh, to our knowledge, is not yet manufacturing, but there is a lot of import happening from China or Thailand or other countries.
Okay. Vandana, you were talking about the priorities of Bangladesh, which needed to be addressed forthwith. And you're expecting that this will be addressed. But one thing, frequently we hear about from the tobacco advocates that taxation policy or the tax structure related to tobacco control and tobacco industry in Bangladesh is very critical, and it has not been adequately addressed over the years. So would you please shed some light about the tax structure and where you would recommend to bring about changes in Bangladesh especially?
Absolutely. In fact, amongst all of the policies in tobacco control, the most effective policy to reduce prevalence and to prevent initiation from youth is taxation. And I am disappointed to say that Bangladesh has really been lagging behind. So on paper, it seems that the taxes are adequate, but if you explore a little bit more, the tobacco tax structure has remained unchanged. It's a very complex slab-based structure. And the best practice is to have a specific tax. You actually still have an ad valorem tax. And there's been like very minimal tax increases over the years. So we actually see that tobacco products have become very affordable, you know, and when you sort of compare them to other essential commodities and keeping up with inflation, we feel that this has become very accessible. So I think there's some clear demands, you know, from economic experts around the world who have studied the Bangladesh tax structure, is that it has to be greatly simplified, and there is a lot of structural reform needed. At the same time, it needs to move to a specific tax with a clear sort of roadmap to continue to increase this tax
every year. What are the barriers in easing out or simplifying the tax structure?
Simply in one word, the industry. You know, clearly that there is, you know, a huge nexus we feel and a huge pressure, because I think globally and clearly in Bangladesh, the argument that industry provides a lot of revenue seems to win the day.
And that's the popular argument.
Yes, so that is the popular argument. And the second argument that wins the day in Bangladesh is sort of the loss of jobs. But globally, we find that neither of these arguments actually hold true. Because if you increase taxes, even though prevalence may decline, the revenue always increases. We have models from so many countries, and the best case scenario is Philippines, which is a global best case practice in tobacco taxation, where even though the tax has been increased significantly, the revenues have kept up a lot. And so we have examples from all over the world that we've shared with the government. Similarly, in terms of job losses or other you know, arguments which the industry puts up, those don't really play out in the short term, because over time, even if there are job losses, there is sort of a gradual adjustment. So really it's a win-win for the government, because not only do you raise and increase revenue, you save lives through the prevalence declines with tobacco taxation.
Then under the given circumstances, how you would diminish or reduce the power of industry when they are so much powerful, and the argument is that you also recognize that there is a popular argument, they are contributing for collecting huge revenue and it supports the economy. So these are the popular arguments. So how you will encounter their influence in tobacco sector?
So in Bangladesh, we have a clear sort of fundamental problem. You know, the Bangladesh government owns nearly 10% of BAT, the leading and most prominent tobacco industry voice, you know, which has, you know, a significant part of the cigarette market. So that is an inherent conflict of interest, because not just the fact that they own this, there's like 4 or 5 secretaries from the Bangladesh government that sit on the BAT board. That presents an inherent conflict.
It's a double standard.
Yeah, so basically, obviously, when they're even regulating the industry, but then they're also working on behalf of industry. So that's a real challenge. And there have been many countries around the world, New Zealand, Hong Kong, many others, that have very systematically divested their interest in a product that is known to be toxic, that is known to be harmful. So there is a huge movement. In fact, even in India, where they own significant stocks through the Life Insurance Corporation of India and ITC, you know, the largest tobacco company in India, there's been sort of clear policy statement that they will not actually, you know, buy any more shares and to move away from such investments. So
but how to comply, make the policymakers compliant in Bangladesh?
So, you know, there is even a sort of some obligation under the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, but this is sort of a moral obligation. So in some ways, you know, it is, we have, you know, advocates and experts around the world have been telling the Bangladesh government that if they are seriously committed to tobacco control, to non-communicable disease, they need to make this commitment.
And that is from the highest level?
Yes, to absolutely to divest. You know, this is a decision at the very highest levels of government. The second challenge we have is there is one very core provision of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, which is Article 5.3. Now in Bangladesh, we do not have Article 5.3 adopted or implemented in domestic law. Basically, Article 5.3 prevents any conflicts of interest by making sure that any engagements with the tobacco industry, they have to be necessary, they have to be disclosed, they have to be transparent. And then secondly, there are many rules of, government officials after retirement moving to industry.
So would you say that there is a clear violation of FCTC or 5.3, Article 5.3?
Yeah, I mean, because the government has not domesticated Article 5.3 by adopting that even within the Ministry of Health, I mean, there is something lacking. It is not a violation yet. But India, for example, the Ministry of Health has sort of across the ministry
it is not legally
adopted.
binding.
Yeah, it's not yet legally binding. And so I think in adopting 5.3 as well as divestment would go a long way in making sort of an equal playing field, because right now tobacco control and tobacco industry are not on a level playing field.
Okay, so overall, we started about the progress we have made so far. So in this part, we will conclude with want to know your view about the very core challenge in the coming days. Just 1, 2, 3.
So just biggest challenge, I think, making sure that the law amendment is supported at the highest levels of government, and a strong law amendment which makes the law compliant with the FCTC and closes these key gaps goes through. The number 2, I would say, focus would be completely on taxation and to make sure that we actually implement the tax reform that has been recommended to the government and to have a specific tax. And to achieve any of these, it will be very important that the government sort of keeps the tobacco industry at bay and puts public health on top.
Okay. Bandana, you are also working on trans fat elimination program and supporting Bangladesh in this program. And recently we heard that Bangladesh government also passed a regulation to limit trans fat in food. And what are the progress? What are the current situation in eliminating trans fat in food?
So Bangladesh actually has a really high burden of cardiovascular disease, and trans fatty acids in the food supply add significantly to the burden of death. We have nearly 500,000 deaths globally from trans fat, of which 30,000 nearly occur in Bangladesh. So we started working nearly 3 years ago when there was a global prioritization on trans fat elimination from WHO and the Resolve to Save Lives initiative. So we started working with the Bangladesh Food Safety.
If you a little bit explain about the meaning of trans fat for our audience.
Yeah, so this trans fat really, there are trans fat in sort of which naturally occurs, in animal products, but the trans fat which is dangerous is really sort of artificially hydrogenated oils, so which is really like what we commonly knew as dalda. So, so dalda, which had become like a household. When you and me were growing up, whether in India or Bangladesh, every home cooked with dalda. And I think there was no understanding that this artificially hydrogenated oils were really harmful and led to like heart disease and heart attacks. And so gradually there was sort of a ban where most homes stopped using it, but there was still a lot of commercial use. So now there's growing awareness that countries should either ban it or limit it to 2%, which is virtually amounts to a ban. And this would be a ban on not just oils and fats, but also in all foods. So 3 years ago, when there was sort of a global sort of effort launched with this Replace initiative with WHO, the Global Health Advocacy Incubator started working in nearly 10 countries, one of which was Bangladesh, to really work on trans fat elimination. And so we started supporting the Bangladesh Food Safety Authority, which is your lead food regulator under the Ministry of Food, to actually really begin the journey of first an assessment of how much trans fat there was, because we had very few studies on how much trans fat there was in the food supply, creating a lot of awareness. We engaged a lot of cardiologists, the public health movement. The National Heart Foundation led that effort. We had a lot of media engagement because there was little or no understanding of what is trans fat and how it's leading to the huge cardiovascular disease burden. So I want to say that my timing of my visit is so incredible because just 1 week ago on Monday the 29th, the Bangladesh government issued regulations to actually join India, Brazil, Turkey and Philippines in actually banning by limiting trans fats and oil fats and foods to 2%. And this will go into effect on December 31st, 2022. And the deadline which WHO had put for countries to become trans fat free was 2023. So this is a huge sort of victory for Bangladesh and for its non-communicable disease movement to actually become trans fat free well in advance of the WHO goal.
Mana, I thank you for your optimism, but there is a very frustrating understanding in Bangladesh about the food safety, about the capacity of the regulators from the Food Safety Authority, and it is a very prevailing knowledge and understanding of the common people is that the food safety in Bangladesh is really dismal. And very frustrating, and the measures you just praised about the measures Bangladesh government has taken, but again when we are talking about the tobacco control issue, there are pledges, there are laws, but implementation is very poor. So do you apprehend that the government which they have taken measures in limiting trans fat in foods, would that be very productive, would that be very meaningful in really translating into reality?
Absolutely. It is going to be very challenging, absolutely, to the fact that implementation is a huge challenge because, from what I understand, Bangladesh Food Safety Authority is a fairly young agency. And I think, there is, yesterday I was with the food minister and the food secretary and the chairman of the BFSA. And I did see a very strong commitment and motivation. But I think I do understand that like India, like other countries, implementation is going to be a challenge. And, and Global Health Advocacy Incubator, I have worked very closely with the FSSAI, Food Safety Authority of India. We've developed an implementation framework. We've, supported them. Similarly, we stand ready to support the government. Okay. But I absolutely understand that the government will need to make, a commitment and, and sort of strengthen its machinery to actually implement the law. Because without implementation, no lives are saved. Because just having a law on paper will mean nothing unless we actually. So a lot of the effort in 2022 needs to be focused on building implementation capacity, getting industry on board so that they actually do whatever reformulation they have to do to actually eliminate all trans fats.
And, your organization in this fight will support Bangladesh, will stand by Bangladesh.
Absolutely. I think we will continue to support them on strengthening implementation. Yesterday, we also launched a public service announcement on a PSA on trans fat with the food minister. So we're excited to build public awareness as well about the health harms so that if there is a demand from the public, the implementation machinery hopefully will move a little bit faster.
Thank you so much for your commitment. Let us focus on another issue. I know that you are dealing with another program that is drowning children prevention. Drowning prevention program of the children. So this is also an alarming area in Bangladesh, and a huge number of children every year lost their life. So how to support Bangladesh, and what is the current situation in your view, in your study, prevailing right this moment?
So absolutely. So drownings, and to our astonishment, is the leading cause of death for children under 5. You know. Thousands of kids every year are killed just within 10-20 feet of their home because it is as simple as when the mother is cooking.
But surprisingly, we even don't know this fact.
I think very few people in Bangladesh, leave alone the world, know this fact. I think it just astonishes them that so many thousands of kids every year under the age of 5 die right outside their home in a little pond, when the mother is cooking or she's doing some basket weaving. So there was like this program 10 years ago, the Bloomberg Philanthropies that I work with, looked at this data, and I also looked at another country, Vietnam, which has a very high incidence of drowning. And we launched a program because there's actually a very simple solution. it is community-based daycares. So they actually launched 2,500 community-based daycare in high drowning prone areas. So these are obviously low-lying areas where there's a lot of small lakes and ponds. Yeah, flood-prone areas where the children very easily, when they walk out of their homes, there are tons of water bodies. And so these community daycares, there's now 2,500 community daycares across the country, in which these kids were going before COVID. Obviously, because of COVID, these haven't been restarted, where an Achol mother would actually, take care of the children. And, this also had multiple benefits. It was also very good for early childhood development, because these are kids under 5. So they were getting like a early childhood curriculum. They were doing a little singing, a little bit learning and play and activity. This was a very structured program. So it's early childhood development program. There was also an element of women's empowerment, because women were getting free time when their kids were away from 9 to 1. Whether to look for livelihood or for their own self-development. So this program, which was initially donor funded by Bloomberg, now is being considered for a DPP with the Bangladesh government, which would be a public-private partnership. And this program would then be expanded to over 8,000 of these across the country over the next 3 years. Okay. So that's in the works, and we are very hopeful that this DPP with the government would be approved to expand this unique effort. And there's also a smaller program of swim lessons for these children along with the daycares.
Vandana, we are almost at the end of our conversations. The last question is that we are still under the pandemic situation where the whole world is fighting against the COVID-19 situation. But what do you think, how does it impact the struggles or the fights or the campaigns like tobacco-free kids or the tobacco control in Bangladesh, or limiting trans fat, or preventing drowning children? How would you relate the COVID-19 situation, how it does affect the programs in Bangladesh?
Two specific points. One, for the most part, the work that I do on multiple issues, it's all non-communicable diseases. Okay. So people who are, actually afflicted by non-communicable diseases, they are more prone to getting, COVID and to actually having worse outcomes if they get COVID. If you have heart disease, or if you have hypertension, all of these come out of, tobacco use or trans fat or hypertension, another project that I work on. So basically, there's never a greater time to focus on NCDs and NCDs elimination as during COVID. The other issue that we find globally is that COVID has actually made health inequities, between the haves and the have-nots even greater, as those, who are stuck in their homes have even poorer access to public health facilities, to medicines. And so it's very important that we actually strengthen health systems which can respond to, the needs of the most vulnerable parts of society during COVID. So I think public health has never been a greater priority. So maybe the one and only benefit of COVID is that countries really need to build back better, but with a major emphasis on public health, both non-communicable disease and health systems.
But at least it gives a greater understanding that it is critically important to reach out the common people with health system and health support.
Absolutely. COVID has made it clear that you cannot have a strong, vibrant nation without a strong public health system and a focus on non-communicable and communicable disease.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much for sharing your views on Frankly Speaking. Vandana, we're very happy to have you today.
Thank you so much.
Dear viewers, that's all my conversation with Vandana Shah, Regional Director, South Asia Programs for CTFK and Global Health Advocacy Incubator. We thank you very much for watching this show and inviting you to watch our next episode. Until then, do take care. And please watch our shows on our website, www.ntvd.com, and visit our YouTube and Facebook pages for programs and current affairs news. Thank you so much for watching Frankly Speaking.